Foaling season. 1. In the dew-saturated foot-high blades of grass, we stand amongst a sea of foals, mare and foal, mare and foal. All over the soft hillside, there are twos, small duos ringing harmoniously in the cold, swallows diving in and out, their fabled forked tail, where, the story says, the fireball hit as it flew to bring fire to humanity. Our friend the Irishman drives us in the gator to sit amongst them. Everywhere doubles of horses still leaning on each other, still nuzzling and curious with each image. 2. 2 female horses, retired mares, separated by a sliding barn door, nose each other. Neither of them will get pregnant again. Their job is just to be a horse. Sometimes, though, they cling to one another, find a friend, and will whine all night for the friend to be released. Through the gate, the noses touch, and you can almost hear, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" 3. I will never be a mother. That's all. That's the whole thought. I could say it returns to me watching the horses, which is true, but also I could say that it came to me as the swallows circled over us and over. Something about the myth of their tale, how generosity is punished by the gods. But isn't that going too far? I saw a mare with her foal, and then many mares with many foals, and I thought simply, I will never be a mother. 4. One foal is a biter, and you must watch him as he bares his teeth and goes for the soft spot. He's brilliant, leggy, and comes right at me, as if directed by some greater gravity. And I stand firm and put my hand out first, rub the long white marking on his forehead, silence his need for biting with affection. I love his selfishness, our selfishness, the two of us testing each other, swallows all around us. Every now and then, his teeth come at me once again. He wants to teach me something, to get me where it hurts. Stillwater Cove. It seemed a furtive magic, sun ricocheting off cresting waves near Stillwater Cove, the soft rock cliffs of sandstone and clay, the wind-tilted cypress trees leaning toward the blue Pacific. And it was only you who'd see them. A migrating pod of gray whales going northward, new calves in tow, shooting a spray of frothy expelled water from their blowholes and making a show of breaching in the clear spring air off the coastline. We'd whine that we'd never caught a glimpse of a slick back or a tail slap, nary a spy-hopping head raised above the swirling surface. Too young to look outward for long, we'd lower our eyes toward what lived small, the alligator lizard in the coyote brush, the bracken fern, orange monkey flower, the beach fly, the earwig, the tick. It was your trick, always a wail as soon as our heads went down. Had to have been a lie. They'd come up while we zeroed in on Mexican sage or the monarch. Distracted by the evidence of life at our feet, We had no time for the waiting that was required. To watch the waves until the whales surfaced seemed a maddening task. Now I am in the inland air that smells of smoke and gasoline, the trees blown leafless by wind. Could you refuse me if I ask you to point again at the horizon, to tell me something was worth waiting for? It begins with the trees. 2 full cypress trees in the clearing intertwine in a way that almost makes them seem like one. Until at a certain angle from the blue blow-up pool I bought this summer to save my life, I see it as not 1 tree, but 2, and they are kissing. They are kissing so tenderly it feels rude to watch. 1 hand on the other's shoulder, another in the other's branches, like hair. When did kissing become so dangerous? Or was it always so? That illicit kiss in the bathroom of the 4-faced liar, a bar named after a clock. What was her name? Or the first one with you on the corner of Metropolitan Avenue, before you came home with me forever. I watch those green trees now, and it feels libidinous. I want them to go on kissing without fear. I want to watch them and not feel so abandoned by hands. Come home. Everything is begging you. The magnificent frigate bird. Is it okay to begin with the obvious? I am full of stones. Is it okay not to look out of this window, but to look out another? A mentor once said, you can't start a poem with a man looking out of a window. Too many men looking out of a window. What about a woman? Today is a haunting. 1 last orange on the counter. It is dead fruit. We swallow dead things. Once in Rio, near Leblon, large seabirds soared over the vast South Atlantic Ocean. I had never seen them before. 8-foot wingspan and gigantic in their confident gliding. Black with a red neck like a wound or a hidden treasure, or both. When I looked up, I learned it was the magnificent frigate bird. It sounded like that enormity of a bird had named itself. What a pleasure to say, I am magnificent. And 2, they traveled as a team, so I wondered if they named each other, generously tapping one another's deeply forked tail or their plumage glistening with salt air, their gular sacs saying, you are magnificent. You are also magnificent. It makes me want to give all my loves the adjectives they deserve. You are resplendent. You are radiant. You are sublime. I am far away from tropical waters. I have no skills for flight or wings to skim the waves effortlessly, like the wind itself. But from here, I can still imagine a rapture, a glorious caught fish in the mouth of a bird.
Blowing on the wheel. It's getting late. The light's grayish gold on the hillside. And I'm thinking of car rides from Brooklyn to the Cape, or up to Moon Mountain from the city, or out to Stockbridge that one winter with H and her sister and cousin, and how we called them the Stockbridges. And I accidentally said, have a Norman Mailer Christmas and not a Norman Rockwell Christmas. And we laughed at how sad a Norman Mailer Christmas would be. Or how another time we waited for T to put our bags in the car, as if she was not just driving, but the driver. Or how after T got a ticket on 6 East, she'd go the speed limit, but low on the steering wheel, like it was a sale, and say, is the car even on? The three of us always piling back into the back of some cab and deciding what was next, which was never bed, because there was still so much to figure out. And how someone once asked H if we ever just ran out of subjects to keep talking about. And of course we wouldn't, we won't. It's endless. Even this is endless. The sky darkening in a way that makes me wish we were wandering around right now around New York City somewhere, or at the Governor Bradford and not wandering at all, or just talking or not talking, or being happy or not unhappy. And this is my secret work, to be worthy of you both and this infinite discourse where everybody is interesting because you point it out and say, isn't that interesting? And how mostly we say, remember that time? And we will nod because we do remember that time, except for the few times we've forgotten. Like that one time when H was trying to remind us of something. And when we asked her what, she said, I don't know, but you were there and I was there. And we were. Joint custody. Why did I never see it for what it was? Abundance. 2 families. 2 different kitchen tables. 2 sets of rules. 2 creeks. 2 highways. 2 step-parents with their fish tanks, or 8 tracks, or cigarette smoke, or expertise in recipes, or reading skills. I cannot reverse it. The record scratched and stopping to that original chaotic track. But let me say, I was taken back and forth on Sundays, and it was not easy, but I was loved each place. And so I have 2 brains now, 2 entirely different brains. The one that always misses where I'm not, and the one that is so relieved to finally be home. Only the faintest blue. Somewhere in the haunted desert, I hitched my callow life to a man who thought I hadn't suffered enough. He might have said that very thing. You haven't suffered enough. Young whiptail lizards lined the cottonwood paths to the river where I walked each day to remember who I was. She who had not suffered. My hands tanned in the sage green air. I walked until I was softer, until clouds, until I could tame my colors and go back and cook a lazy dinner. Once he insisted I ride home with a friend who was clearly drunk, so he could make a call he didn't want me to hear. An ex, a lawyer, a dealer, I don't know. I knew I didn't like his friend, who drove too fast after shots of tequila at the roadside Mexican dive with fake spiky cacti in the foyer with like stage props. Maybe this is suffering, I thought. Am I suffering now? Or now? I felt most myself by the river, vast sorrel river, ready to flood or tear down everything in its way, hard to cross, rapid and legendary. The color of the earth. I did not want to throw myself in. Instead, I'd watch the whiptails skitter in dust, sisters of the small, quiet pleasures of edges and disappearing to safety. I can still hear that river in my mind. My teacher can still remember the day I left him arguing, the fight where I kept my head down and packed like fury was a new smart skill. But mostly I remember the flitting of lizards, how they had felt like kinship, how later I read that the New Mexico whiptail is an all-female species, reproducing by parthenogenesis, asexual and yet genetically diverse. Yellow lines run the length of their gray bodies, with vibrant blue-green tails when they're young. And as they age, their scales, their whole body changes until only the faintest blue remains. And safer now, they become the earthen color of the river. Calling things what they are. I pass the feeder and yell, "Grackle party!" And then an hour later, I yell, "Morning dove after party." I call the feeder the party and the seed on the ground the after party. I am getting so good at watching that I've even dug out the binoculars an old poet gave me back when I was young and heading to the Cape with so much future ahead of me. It was like my own ocean. "Tufted titmouse," I yell. And Lucas laughs and says, "Thought so." But he is humoring me. He didn't think so at all. My father does this same thing, shouts out at the feeder announcing the party attendees. He throws out a whole peanut or two to the Stellar's jay, who visits on a low oak branch in the morning. To think there was a time I thought birds were kind of boring. Brown bird, gray bird, black bird, blah, blah, blah bird. Then I started to learn their names by the ocean. And the person I was dating said, "That's the problem with you, Limón. You're all fauna and no flora." And I began to learn the names of trees. I like to call things as they are. Before, the only thing I was interested in was love, how it grips you, how it terrifies you, how it annihilates and resuscitates you. I didn't know then that it wasn't even love that I was interested in, but my own suffering. I thought suffering kept things interesting. How funny that I called it love, and the whole time it was pain. I have wanted clarity in light of my lack of light. After Alejandra Pizarnik. Fireworks in the background like an incongruous soundtrack, either celebratory or ominous, a veil of smoke behind a neighbor's house, the air askew with booms. The silver suitcase is dragged down the stairs, a clunk, another clunk, awkward wheels where wheels aren't any use, uselessness of invention. There is a knocking in the blood that is used to absence, but hates this part the most, the sudden buried hope of illusion. Lose my number? Sadness. Lose my address? My storm dull door? My skull? Am I stronger or weaker than when the year began? A lie that joins two cells like a hinge. Sawdust in the neighbor's garage that smells of the men who raised me. What is the other world that others live in, unknown to me, the ease of grin and good times? Once I loved fireworks so much they made me weep without warning. I smoked too much pot one young summer and almost missed them, until I simply remembered to look up. Gold Valley crackling in chaos. Now it is a sound that undoes me, too much violence to the sky. In this way, I have become more dog, more senses, shake and nerve. Better now when the etches in the night's edges are just bats, erratic and avoiding the fireflies. How much more drama can one body take? I wake up in the morning and relinquish my dreams. I go to bed with my beloved. I am delirious with my tenderness. Once I was brave, but I have grown so weary of danger. I am soundlessness amid the constant sounds of war. It's the season I often mistake birds for leaves and leaves for birds. The tawny yellow mulberry leaves are always goldfinches tumbling across the lawn like extreme elation. The last of the maroon crabapple ovates are song sparrows that tremble all at once. And today, just when I could not stand myself any longer, a group of field sparrows, which were actually field sparrows, flew up into the bare branches of the hackberry, and I almost collapsed, leaves reattaching themselves to the tree like a strong spell for reversal. What else did I expect? What good is accuracy amidst the perpetual scattering that unspools the world?
How we see each other. I forget I am a woman walking alone and wave at a maroon car, assuming it's a neighbor or a friend. The car then circles the block and goes past me 5 times. One wave, and 5 times the car circles. Strangers. It is the early evening, the fireflies not yet out. I trick the hunting car by pretending to walk into a different house. I am upset by this, but it is life. So I make dinner and listen to a terrible audiobook on Latin American literature that's so dull, it's Dove soap. Violence is done and history records it. Gold ruins us, men ruin us. That's how the world was made, you know? A group of us, to tune out grief every week, are watching dance movies. 5 women watching people leap and grind. Every time I watch the films, I cry. Each week, even though we are hidden from each other by distance, I know I am the first to break into tears. Something about the body moving freely, someone lifting it, or just the body alone in movement, safe in the black expanse of stage. The body as rebellion, as defiance, as immune. Aricelis writes to tell me that she has had a dream when I am in Oaxaca, wearing a black dress covered with animals. In her dream, I am brushing my hair with a brush made out of animal hair. There is a large mirror and a room full of books. History comes at us through the sheen of time. I write back, was it ominous or was it hopeful? She says, the word I am thinking of is strong. I kindle the image in my body all day, the mirror, the brush, the animals, the vast space of the imagination, the solid gaze of a woman who has witnessed me as unassailable, the clarity of her vision, so clean, I feel almost free. Sports. I've seen my fair share of baseball games, even smothered hot dogs in Kansas City and carne asada burritos in San Francisco in the sunny strands on a day free of fog. I've sat in a bar for hours watching basketball and baseball and the Super Bowl. And I've even high-fived and clinked my almost empty drink with a stranger because it felt good to go through something together, even though we hadn't been through anything but the drama of a game. It's players. If I am honest, what I love, why I love the sounds of the games, even when I'm not interested, half listening, is one thing. When my father and my stepfather had to be in the same room or had to drop my brother and me off during our weekly move from one house to another, they, for a brief moment, would stand together in the doorway or on the gravel driveway, and it felt like what true terror should feel like. Two men who were so different you could barely see their shadows attached in the same way. And just when I thought that I wouldn't watch the pause lengthen between them, they would talk about the playoffs or the finals or whatever team was doing whatever thing required that season. And sometimes they'd even shrug or make a motion that felt like two people who weren't opposites after all. Once I sat in the car and I waited for one of them to take me away, and from the back seat, I swear they looked like they were in the same team, united against a common enemy, had been fighting all this time on the same side. Heart on Fire. As a foster child, my grandfather learned not to get into trouble. Mexican and motherless, dead as she was from tuberculosis, he practiced words in a new language and kept his slender head down. When the other boys begged him to slip into the music shop's upper window to steal harmonicas for each of them, music being important, thievery being secondary, he refused. When the cops came to spot the boys who robbed this music store, they could easily find the ones spitting broken notes into the air, joyously mouthing their stainless steel, mimicking men on street corners busking for coins. But not my grandfather. He knew not to risk it all for a stolen moment of exultation. It's easy to imagine this is who I come from a line of serious men who follow the rules. But might I add that later, he was a dancer, a singer, an actor, whose best roles ended up on the cutting room floor. A cut-up, a ham who liked a good story, who would have told you life was a series of warnings, but also magic. Once he was sent for a box of matches, and he put that box of strike anywheres in the pocket of his Madras shirt and ran home. He ran so fast to be on time, to be good. And when he did so, the whole box ignited. So he was a boy running down the canyon road with what looked like a heart on fire. He'd laugh when he told you this. A heart on fire. That he'd say that so you'd remember. Hooky. We skipped that last class, rolled joints in my clean apartment close to a bar called Flowers, which we loved, and went to so often that once Joel's dad found his maxed out credit card statement and said, "Who are you buying all these flowers for?" That day, we weren't bound for the bar, where Fadi kept a back table for friends, and on busy nights let us hover. It was a rare Brigadoon day when the sun bared itself in Seattle's U District, and the trees were in heat, and everything felt wild and illicit. And we decided to get as high as we could and lie down under the cherry trees. I was straight A's and Dean's List, but could roll 3 perfect joints and even add a filter thanks to 3 guys I met in a Spanish hostel. And when we made it to that kaleidoscope row of ancient cherry trees, we started laughing hard and scary-like, contagious. And the breeze was blowing pink cherry blossoms through the air. And everyone we saw was stoned and making out with someone. And it seemed so absurd that we would ever learn anything from inside the darkness. And soon it wasn't so funny anymore, but serious. The true and serious beauty of trees. How it seemed insane that they should offer this to us. How unworthy we were, bewildered, right in the center of town. How soon we were nearly weeping at their trunks as they tossed down petal after petal, and we tried to remember how it felt to receive and notice the receiving. Ping, 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 ping. Lover. Each light storms in through the window, soft edges of the world smudged by mist, a squirrel's nest rigged high in the maple. I got a bone to pick with whoever is in charge. All year I've said, you know what's funny? And then nothing is funny, which makes me laugh. In an oblivion is coming out sort of way. A friend writes the word lover on a note, and I am strangely excited for the word lover to come back. Come back, lover. Come back to the 5 and dime. I could squeal with the idea of blissful release. Oh, lover, what a word. What a world, this gray waiting. In me, a need to nestle deep into the safekeeping of sky. I am too used to nostalgia now, a sweet escape of age. Centuries of pleasure before us and after us, still right now. A softness like the worn fabric of a nightshirt. And what I do not say is, I trust the world to come back, return like a word long forgotten and maligned for all its gross tenderness. A joke told in a sunbeam, the world walking in, ready to be ravaged, open for business.
The hurdy kind. 1. On the plane, I have a dream. I've left half my torso on the back porch with my beloved. I have to go back for it, but it's too late. I'm flying, and there's only half of me. Back in Texas, the flowers I've left on the counter, I stay alone there, so the flowers are more than flowers. I have wilted and knocked over the glass. At the funeral parlor with my mother, we are holding her father's suit, and she says, he'll swim in these. For a moment, I'm not sure what she means until I realize she means the clothes are too big. I go with her like a shield in case they try to upsell her
the ridiculously ornate urn, the elaborate body box. It is a nice bathroom in the funeral parlor, so I take the opportunity to change my tampon. When I come out, my mother says, "Did you have to change your tampon?" And it seems all at once a vulgar life, or not vulgar, but not simple either. I'm driving her now to Hillside Cemetery, where we meet with Rosie, who is so nice. We want her to work everywhere. Rosie as my dentist, Rosie as my president. My shards are showing, I think, but I do not know what I mean, so I fix my face in the rear view mirror. A face with thousands of headstones behind it, minuscule flags, plastic flowers. You can't sum it up, my mother says as we're driving. And the electronic voice says, "Turn left onto Wildwood Canyon Road." So I turn left, happy for the instructions. Tell me where to go. Tell me how to get there. She means a life, of course. You cannot sum it up. Too. A famous poet said he never wanted to hear another poem about a grandmother or a grandfather. I imagine him with piles of faded yolk-colored paper, overloaded with loops of swooping cursive, anemic lyrics misspelling warning for mourning. But also, before they arrive, there's a desperate hand scribbling a memory following, the cat of imagination into each room. What is lineage, if not a gold thread of pride and guilt? She did what? Once, I thought I'd had to decided not to have children. A woman said, "But who are you to kill your own bloodline?" I told my friend Dee that she said, "What if you want to kill your own bloodline like it's your job?" In the myth of La Llorona, she drowns her children to destroy her cheating husband. But maybe she was just tired. After her husband of 76 years has died, my grandmother said, yes, I said it. Grandmother leans to me and says, now, teach me poetry. Sticky packs of photographs, heteromaniacal postcards, the war, bikini girls, tight curls, the word gams, land bloom, Atchison, Topeka, Santa Fe, Southern Pacific. We asked my grandma, Alame, about her mother for a form. Records and wills, evidence of life. For a moment, she can't remember her mother's maiden name. She says, just tell them she never wanted me. That should be enough. Red sadness is a secret. One, writes Rouflay. Redlands was named after the soil. Alame can still hold a peach in her hand and judge its number by its size, tell you where it would go in the box. If you're packing out peaches for a living, which she did, though she hated the way the hairs hurt her hands. Why do we quickly dismiss our ancient ones? before our phones stole the light of our faces, shining blue in the televised night. They worked farms and butchered and trapped animals, swept and returned to each other after long hours and told stories. In order for someone to be good, they do have to have seen the full tilt world. Must they believe what we believe? My grandmother keeps a picture of her president in the top drawer of her dresser. And once, when she was delusional, she dreamt he had sent her grandfather and her on a trip to Italy. He paid for it all. She kept repeating. That same night on her ride to the hospital, she talks to the medical technician and says, all my grandchildren are Mexican. She says so proudly. She repeats it to me on the phone. 5. Once a long time ago, we sat in the carport of my parents' house in Redlands, now stolen by eminent domain. Now the hospital parking lot, no more coyotes or caves where the coyotes would live, or the grandfather clock in the house my grandfather built, the porch above the orchard all gone. We sat in the carport and watched the longest snake I'd ever seen undulate between the hanging succulents. They told me not to worry, that the snake had a name. The snake was called California King. All slick, black, and yellow, stripes like wonders wrapping around him. My grandparents, my ancestors, told me never to kill a California king. Benevolent as they were, equanimous like earth or sky, not toothy like the dog Chaco, who barked at nearly every train whistle or roadrunner. Before my grandfather died, I asked him what sort of horse he had growing up. He said, just a horse, my horse, with such a tenderness. It rubbed the bones in my ribs all wrong. I have always been too sensitive, a weeper from a long line of weepers. I am the hurting kind. I keep searching for proof. My grandfather carried that snake to the cactus where all sharp things could stay safe. 6. You can't sum up a life. I feel a moving through me. The snake, his horse Midge sturdy and nothing special, traveling the canyon and tumbleweeds, hunting for the rabbits before the war. My grandmother picking peaches, stealing the fruit from the orchards as she walked home. No one said it was my job to remember. I took no notes, though. I stared too long. My grandfather, before he died, would have told anyone that would listen that he was ordinary. His life was a good one, simple. He could never understand why anyone would want to write it down. He would tell you straight up he wasn't brave. And my grandmother would tell you right now that he is busy getting the house ready for her, visiting now each night and even doing the vacuuming. I imagine she's right. It goes on and on. Their story. They met in first grade in a one-room schoolhouse. I could have started their story there, but it is endless and ongoing. All of this is a conjuring. I will not stop this reporting of attachments. There's evidence everywhere. There's a tree over his grave now, and soon her grave too, though she is tough and says, I'll never die, which is marvelous, and maybe why she's still alive. I see the tree above the grave and think, I'm wearing my heart on my leaves. My heart on my leaves. Love ends. But what if it doesn't? Against nostalgia. If I had known back then you were coming, when I first thought love would be a thing to save me after all. If I had known, would I have still glued myself to the back of his motorcycle while we flew across the starless bridge over the East River to where I grew my first garden, behind the wire fencing in the concrete raised beds lined by ruby twilight roses? If I had known, it would be you, who even then I like to look at across the room, always listening rigorously, a self-questioning look, the way your mouth was always your mouth. Would I have climbed back on that bike again and again until even I was sick with fumes and the sticky seat too hot in the early fall? If I had known, but I have still made mistake after mistake until I had only the trunk of me left, stripped and nearly bare of leaves. If I had known, the truth is, I would have kneeled and said, sooner, come to me sooner. Forgiveness. It was the winter of manatees. Captain Rhonda and her chartered pontoon boat floating down the Crystal River. It was the winter you hurt me, and that day of dumb hearts when you brought me truffles and perfume like a performance at the tiki bar in the cold February Florida wind. Rihanna played over the staticky speakers hidden behind a fake coconut. Something about giving up or saying something. At the restaurant later, the couple we laughed at in their late 50s for maybe being swingers, all the uniform tables, identical roses, and cheap plastic vases. Even my deep cleavage and the layer cake were trying too hard. Still, we committed to the event of us and made a joke about not hurting each other again. We weren't married yet. Everyone's free to leave. And the next afternoon, you went to work, and I took a boat down the river to see the manatees. It was back when I got lonely often. I called and asked if I could bring my dog on the boat. I couldn't. So tranquil and patient, the manatees moving, so many mysteries even the shallow water. Captain Rhonda showed us her hideous hideouts, their shadowy places. People took pictures and pointed, and you could see the scars on the older animals from the propeller blades. And still they rolled on together in the silent water. Back on shore, you found me by the too cold pool, watching a group of loud teenagers drink in the hot tub. One shirtless boy kept flexing and flexing while the girls, engrossed in conversation, never noticed. And Art, we all alone in the end. You put your head for a moment against my chest, and all I could hear was your breathing. We were both human and animal-hearted, bound to the blaze, bound to unrun them. Heat. The icicles dripped and sharpened in my bones. Even my sick, dark mood was shiny like glass, breakable and almost decorative. In my world of brittle needles, I was building my house of ice, brick by brick, as fastened by sullenness. Then, like a huge feral animal, you stomped down the stairs to the ground floor where I sulked. I did not look up to see you, talking as you were on the phone with a comrade about a horse or the snow light and how it reflected on the horse. And you were all business. And I was all business. Until I looked toward you, and you, like some freshly baptized sinner, were naked, still wet from the shower, barefoot, bare, and dripping. And from where I was kneeling, I was made aware of your fineness. Your body, I thought, belonged to me, until I learned about belonging was sublime, looming over me like a gauntlet. And because you were a challenge, I rose from the cold to meet you.
Obedience. The dog lifts her head from the piles of dead leaves, and at first she is calm, until she is not. She can't find me, not behind the cypress or the still bare viburnum. Betrayer, I am watching from the window, warm behind the door frame. What is it to be wholly loved like this? God, how desperate she is to find me. Walking toward her, I watch her whole body vibrate when I come into focus. I lift her into my arms because it is what I want. Who doesn't want to hold their individual God, to be redeemed by pleasing the only one you serve? The end of poetry. Enough of osseous and chickadee and sunflower and snowshoes, maple and seeds, samara and shoot. Enough chiaroscuro, Enough of thus and prophecy and the stoic farmer and faith and our Father and 'tis of thee. Enough of bosom and bud, skin and God, not forgetting, and star bodies and frozen birds. Enough of the will to go on and not go on, or how a certain light does a certain thing. Enough of the kneeling and the rising, and the looking inward and the looking up. Enough of the gun, the drama, and the acquaintance's suicide, the long lost letter on the dresser. Enough of the longing and the ego and the obliteration of ego. Enough of the mother and child and the father and the child. And enough of the pointing to the world, weary and desperate. Enough of the brutal and the border. Enough of can you see me? Can you hear me? Enough. I am human. Enough. I am alone and I am desperate. Enough of the animal saving me. Enough of the high water. Enough sorrow. Enough of the air and its ease. I am asking you to touch me.
Thank you, ladies, for such a lyrical and loving and radiant reading and all the different emotions that Ada Limón wrote about. Very, very deeply touching. And didn't that last poem express something at least each one of us has felt? And just a wonderful reading. So, Jennifer, shall we close, or do you want each one of us to take a minute or two to talk a bit?
I think you should take a minute or two. That was an extraordinary hour.
Okay. Why don't we start with Corinne and go in the order that we read and say a few things about the reading or the poetry. Corinne, you have to unmute.
Here I am, just like Kay. I do everything she does.
Thank you, Corinne.
Well, I was just as Harry said, this last poem that you read, the end of poetry. I'm kind of rereading it as we were sitting here. It just, yes, I was thinking of that's one I'll have to study. It just hit a lot of notes, didn't it? As all her poetry did, maybe because, it's really accessible, I think you'd say. It's like talking to each other. And it just hit about all the things that we think and feel. So, I really loved her stuff, and I loved the excitement of it. And, it's very exciting.
Helen?
I enjoyed Ada Limón. Ada Limón. She's a very beautiful woman. I looked up a little bit about her, and her poetry it examines the relationship between the natural world and humanity. And also in my first poem that I read called "Blowing the Wheel," I was very happy that for once something that was referenced I could understand, which was when she talked about taking a trip to Stockbridge, and then she mentioned that she made a mistake, and she said that Mary have a good Norman Mailer Christmas instead of Norman Rockwell. And the reason I knew what she was talking about for a change is that I went to Stockbridge, and there is a Norman Rockwell museum there, and
Right.
Oh, that is a great line, and I know what she's talking about. So that was kind of
I went to Stockbridge too, Helen.
there you
About
go.
that. Yes.
Well, maybe
Just
we
like
can
in the
go back
poem.
and
Friends,
go back
yeah.
together one day. Yeah. Anyway, I loved her poetry, and I'm glad she's our poet laureate now. It's wonderful.
Toni?
Well, talking about stock, I love her poetry, for one thing. I think she's very, very honest and very down to earth. And every word is really a delight to read. Stockbridge, that's where I'm from. I'm from the Berkshires, for heaven's sakes. That's where I went to Tanglewood every summer growing up with my family. I'm from the I'm near Lee, where the dance company was, and
Jacob's Pillow.
Jacob's Pillow. Oh yeah, I've been there many times. So it's interesting that she would go to Stockbridge, and she's Mexican, right?
Yes.
That's kind of interesting.
Kay?
Yes. The word that I wrote down, it's funny, Corinne, I wrote down accessible also. and then she surprises you and touches you deeply with a phrase or a word. And also I love that she tells you so much about her life and her family. So
Yes.
in reading it, you want to know her, or you feel like you know a little bit about her. I love her work also.
Yeah.
One poem she said, I am delirious with tenderness, when she was talking about war. And then in that title poem, The Hurting Kind, that Toni read, I am the hurting kind. I keep searching for proof, and she gives us the proof. And really quite a range of emotions, as we all know. Well, thank you, ladies, once again. It's always such a pleasure. You're all such great readers, and you really get into the center of the poem, and you bring it to life. And so thank you, Corinne, Helen, Kay, Toni, and thank you very much, Jennifer.
You guys did a great job. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey, Harry.
Next week, we have two wonderful poets, Susan Hayden, who's reading it from a new book, Now You Are a Missing Person. She has a fabulous reading series in LA called Library Girls Series, one of the greatest in LA, and a woman up in San Francisco, Kim Shuck, who is she's a former poet laureate of Los Angeles, who's genuine, and she's a great poet too. So thank you all very much.